Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. I'm coming to you in this intro, 10:30 p.m. Thursday night before this episode drops. Sitting here, Mabel at my feet, Squee behind the computer on the desk. What a Norman Rockwell picturesque tableau in the middle of the hellscape that is Los Angeles. Yep, folks, much like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, my game is 6 Degrees of Dystopia. I can take a wonderful scene and in hopefully less than 6 degrees, connect it to the living hell we're all stewing in. I tell you what, maybe I should not freeform these introductions because you can see every time where my brain goes immediately. But I'll tell you what's not a hellscape today's episode, because I love my guest, Cedric Noel. If you don't know who Cedric is, why don't I read you his bio right now? Montreal-based artist Cedric Noel has spent the past decade creating music informed by his unique worldview. He was born in Niger to Canadian and Mozambican/Belgian parents, spent his upbringing around the world, and is currently based in Canada. During this time, Cedric has released a number of critically praised full-length albums, EPs, and collaborative works of his own, while also playing bass for acts like Ada Leah and many others. His latest album, Hang Time, is out now on Joyful Noise, and it's great. That's one of the things I like a lot about doing this show, is that a lot of publicists send me music. That tends to be also why there are a lot more musicians than other kinds of artists on the show lately. And also, honestly, I don't think there's a lot of people doing these kind of long-form interviews with musicians as much as they are doing them with actors and comedians. But a lot of what people send me doesn't really resonate, but every once in a while, like Cedric's music, I'll discover something new, and then I'll get to talk to the person, and they're just as cool as their music. So yeah, we talk about growing up all over the world, and I won't spoil anything. You'll get to hear it in the interview just in a moment. But first, quickly, if you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that wherever you get your podcast from. We're doing a lot of great talks lately. Just Indigo D'Souza, David Thomas of Pure Ubu, Buzz from the Melvins, tons of other great people lately. So if you want to subscribe, please do that. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Andy Beckerman. As always, Twitter for dumb jokes. Trying to pretend like it's 2011 on Twitter, and instead of screaming about the world, just writing some dumb jokes. And then Instagram for pictures of our animals and Naomi. So that's how that breaks down. And stay tuned. A lot of awesome episodes coming up. I just talked to Brent Jennings, who is one of the main actors on Lodge 49, one of my favorite shows of the last couple years. I talked to Jim Gavin a couple years ago, who was the creator of the show. Jack Cooper from the British band Modern Nature. That was really great. And, Daniel Wyke, experimental guitarist. That's one of my favorite talks in a long time. So stay tuned for those. But now, hey, you know what? You may not know Cedric, so why don't I play a song from his new album? This is the first one off of Hang Time. It's called Camu. And then we're going to talk to Cedric. But first, here's Camu. just full of Cartesian doubt all the time. I'm full of like, I know I looked at this thing and I know I saw it's recording, but am I sure it's recording? Am I sure? And that's like everything. It plagues me.
Yeah.
That like, well, I know I'm right about it, but maybe I'm not right about it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I feel those feelings so much.
Wait, you were a journalist before?
Yeah, for a little while. Like I went to school for journalism and communications, and I worked for like a arts. What would it be, like an arts website, I guess, for a while in New Brunswick in Fredericton on the east coast of Canada, and just did a lot of like writing and like radio. I worked for a radio station for a while too, and that was really fun. But I don't do that now. But I'll probably do it again at some point. Yeah, I like it.
Did you? So when you went to. Did you go to like actual J school or did you go to
Yeah.
What was the thing that like that propelled you into that? Did you have like a existential desire to be a journalist, or was it just like, oh, I could do this?
I probably like a bit of both. Like I lived in a lot of places growing up, and the only like sort of constant thing was the BBC, so we'd always watch BBC. And I think there was something, and both my parents have jobs or have had jobs that, you know, like kind of made us move around a lot. And so that seemed normal. And so I was probably like looking for a way to do that myself. And now that I think about it, like I like being on stage. I like, you know, performing in some kind of way. So probably I wanted to be like a foreign correspondent on TV. That was kind of the goal. That never happened, obviously. But and it but also seemed like, you know, like a moral good thing to do. Like, you know, like you're doing good in the world if you're a journalist, which now I guess is maybe not always seen as that, but like definitely like 15 years ago, the landscape's changed so much, but yeah, especially 15 years ago, anyways, to me, it was like, that's like being a journalist is a good thing.
Yeah, you know? It is. Well, I mean, again, it's like you said. I mean, there is a very stark dividing line between like ProPublica and The Intercept and Democracy Now.
Yeah,
and even Democracy Now is shading into a little bit of liberal territory, liberal white moderate territory sometimes. Versus like, you know, Washington Post and or I mean, I don't even know what the equivalent would be in Canada, but you know, kind of corporate media. Yeah,
I mean. In Canada, I'm trying to think, like, in Canada, you have, like, the sort of the public broadcasting, so it's the CBC, it's like essentially the BBC, but for Canada, it's publicly funded, and then you have, you know, your private newspapers, and I think, like, maybe provincially funded things, and then privately funded, like, national media as well, like Global News or CTV, I think, are privately funded. Man, it's been a while since I've thought about these things, but, there isn't, like... It's definitely not the same as the States. Like the States is just, I feel like there's no like central place where you feel like maybe you can like fully trust. Whereas maybe here, like, I don't know if I can fully trust the CBC, but I can trust it more than I can maybe trust like CNN or MSNBC or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
No, here it's become fully, I was going to say partisan. I would like if you're talking about like corporate media sources, like I still think that, like, did you ever read Manufacturing Consent?
No.
The first chapter of Manufacturing Consent, I think, is like a beautiful model for how media in a capitalist society, at least like America, works, where there are certain filters that like filter out people who are going to have their own opinions on things, and basically it represents elite opinion. And corporate media represents elite opinion in this model. And it's not always the same opinion, right? Like the very wealthy have differing opinions, but there's a boundary around what they believe.
For
usually.
sure.
And corporate media is just a reflection of that. And so when you see arguments play out in corporate media, those arguments are what the elites are arguing among themselves. But then over time, I think Matt Taibbi has a book called Hate Incorporated, which I thought was really good. And it basically says that like in the last 20 years, that model has transformed into this hyper partisan one where now you have CNN and MSNBC representing liberal elite opinion, whereas Fox News represents GOP, or I mean, at this point, fascist elite opinions.
No, it's wild. I don't know how you guys do it. I won't delve into it too much, I guess.
I mean,
it's just so fascinating looking in, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to something you had said before, because this is something that's been on my mind for the last couple years. What year were you born in?
91.
Okay, so you're like a full like 10 years younger than me. I have this theory that we went through this kind of like existential paradigm shift where, like, if you were about my age, around my age maybe, or an older, you grew up with this kind of like feeling of like an existential feeling that like, oh, I'm gonna just follow my dreams out, right? Whatever they are. Like, you know, I've always wanted to be a TV writer. Well, I won't go into it, but yes, let's just go with that, right?
Yeah.
TV writer, stuff like that. Whereas, like, I think if you grew up like in the 90s or later, there is a very, like, you grow up with this kind of like feeling like, well, I should do something that is ethically, like after the Reagan years just kind of like destroyed the world, like started to like destroy the world in a real like accelerated fashion. Yeah. I think there started to be this sentiment of like, maybe I should do something that actually helps, that is actually ethical or moral. And I'm curious if you grew up with that sentiment in any way.
For sure. I'm trying to think of, I feel like maybe my reasons were different. Like, I don't think, like, I never had it. I don't know if I had like at the outset, like, of, you know, wanting to do good or whatever. I don't think that came from any existential dread. I think it came from, you know, like my origin story or whatever is very complicated, but like I'm born in Niger and I was adopted and we lived in just so many places in the world. And so I feel like a duty, because I feel so like, I just feel like I like won the lottery of being able to have this bizarre life, this great life so far, that I feel like it's my duty to give back in some way. So that's maybe more where it comes from for me. But now I'm definitely like, you know, maybe in the last couple of years, I'm kind of like, okay, but, you know, I'm also like a person and I should try to do things that also make me happy in some way. And, you know, it's not necessarily being selfish to want to do that, as long as I'm being aware of the people around me or the things around me in a way. But that is interesting, because that I do see that though. Like I agree with your theory, I think. Yeah. I'll talk with my friends in their 40s a bit more about it. But I think I see that dichotomy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was just something about I mean, I definitely have a very even though I guess I'm technically like the tail end of Gen X, I am I have the same kind of like moral skeleton as millennials in terms of like, you know, I'm a socialist, I'm in DSA, I do a lot of activist work, and I've just noticed this kind of shift. Again, it's all anecdotal. This show, look, I'm going to tell you this. This show is all anecdotal thoughts. And I see what lines up with my guess and what doesn't line up with my guess, and we'll see. So yeah, I just think there is this more kind of like as people, like the younger you get as time goes on, and you know, you're like, if we don't do something, we're going to be living in a real what I've been calling the slow dystopia. We're going to be living in this kind of just like things just slowly breaking down around us. So maybe we should act in some way.
We should have some kind of agency. Yeah. I think, it's just like the struggle between wanting to have that agency and then feeling helpless because it's so huge. Yeah. And you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this though, where it's just like, well, I have that same kind of feeling, and then Chris Hedges, who was a war correspondent and is now a kind of a left writer, and he an activist, and he teaches in prisons. He was on the show like last year sometime, and I said the same thing, and he's like, "Well, you just start, you just do it, because you're going to help. You just have to help the people around you." So I'm like, "Oh yeah."
That's not wrong. I mean, that's not wrong. I think like, yeah, that's not wrong, but also like, I do feel like we have, especially as people who live in North America, have a real duty to, and especially people in America, but I like, because, yeah, I'm just fascinated by how history is taught in the States, and I talk to my American friends, and it just seems so different than what actually has happened
Oh, it's
in America
propaganda.
and in the world. Yeah. But like, I feel like, we also have a duty to help those who are far away from us, because a lot of the problems that most of, if not all the problems that exist in other countries are caused by, like the folks in this, people who have lived in the States or in Canada or in Europe, obviously colonialism, but even like in the last century. So, yeah, I agree with that, but also like you got to help everybody in a way, or like it's our responsibility.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about that then. What is the morality you grew up with? Did you grow up with like a religious morality? Did your parents instill some kind of like, just like, hey, do good, capital G good? Like, what did they tell you, or what did you get from like the places you grew up in?
I'm not religious at all. Neither my parents are. I mean, I think they were both religious at some point when they were kids, but like by the time we were in the picture, it was definitely no longer the case. I mean, they both worked for NGOs for a long time. My dad worked at the UN for a while before I was born as well. So I think there's like that part of their lives that is obviously, instilled in us, and that's what we know them as doing. So that seems like a very obvious thing to do. But then on top of that, I think like confronting the huge disparity between poverty and wealth in different countries. Like, we lived in the Philippines, we lived in Kenya, we also like, lived in the Netherlands. I live in Canada now. But that's still, I think because it's so in your face in certain places that when you maybe arrive, to Montreal, where that's sort of tried, it's there are attempts to make that a bit more hidden. It's just like it's too obvious to see. So I feel very responsible and like feel very empathetic to that in a big way. But then also, I went to international schools. Like, they're very like, expensive private schools that like my parents' work was paying for, but like there would be a lot of sort of wealthy kids in as well. It's kind of wild that teachers said this, but basically they're like, you are the leaders of tomorrow. Like, this is your, like, this is like, you are going to be, you're going to be president. You're going to do this at the UN. Like that was kind of the way that we were sort of raised at school. So it's kind of hard to unlearn a lot of that, because I think like I understand the sentiment behind it, but that's a wild thing to tell a 10-year-old, and to have to carry that, because like that's what I felt until I went to university, was that like I needed to go to like a big university so I could like have a huge job where I was saving the world or whatever, which is cool, but like doesn't make any sense for everybody. For most people.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird. I mean, I grew up pretty middle class, but I remember, but I was like top of my class, and I remember my guidance counselor talking to me once and saying like, telling me about noblesse oblige, who's like the obligation of the nobles. Like you're gonna grow up to be like a I don't remember exactly what he said, but leader of industry, something like that. And I was like, okay. And so you have an obligation to give back to the the dumber. Like he didn't say it like this, but like
Oy, yeah.
the lesser people. And I was like, okay. And I didn't believe it, but I remember, and it's weird too, because like, especially being middle class, like you're not going to be the leader of anything except maybe like, the manager of, the
Maybe.
local. Yeah. Well, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe.
I find in the United States that like there's a couple places where there's mobility, there's class mobility.
Okay. Yeah.
And it
fair
is
enough. Yeah.
entertainment, and sports.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it at this point. I think it's gotten very difficult for there to be any kind of real class mobility at least here. I don't know about anywhere else.
That's probably not untrue. Like, in a probability sense for sure. Like, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about the States to comment on that with any sort of depth, but yeah, that seems pretty true in what I know of it. But I think that's definitely true in other places as well. But I do think like, the educational system is set up for that too in a big way. And the more I learn about the educational system in the States versus maybe here or in other places. Yeah, it's just, it is interesting. You can just like pick any system and go into it and be like, oh, okay, well, this is how it's favoring these folks versus these folks. So,
well, I mean, look, it's not a stretch to just use Bell Hook's term. What is it? White supremacist capitalist patriarchy for like okay, that pretty much describes how things are structured and how how people filter up or down or work their way through their lives in these structures. But like I know I had that kind of like, and from being like the top of my class and stuff, I had this kind of like feeling up until like I got into philosophy. I studied philosophy in college. That I'm like, oh, like I'm supposed to be this like head of everything in some way. And you also had that, but from these like going to international schools with the children of the very wealthy.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I mean, I still have that a little bit, I still have that a little bit in that I feel like I still need to be doing something on a bigger scale, which, whatever, is an internal conflict. But I think luckily I don't feel that too much in music. So that's like, I think that would be a weird energy to bring to like my community of people. I know people with that energy, but that's not how I would like to live my life.
Sure. No, they're psychopaths.
Yeah. Well, or I mean, depending. Yeah. But yeah, I don't want to blanket that, but that's
okay. I
definitely
will.
That. Okay. They'll come after you.
No, but okay. So how did that internal conflict play out in you? Like you go to school for journalism, right?
Yeah.
With this kind of like idea of like, I want to be this, like, did you go in with this idea of like, I want to be like, a well-known journalist in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was like well known, but it was like, or want to be like a consequential journalist. I want to have some kind of influence over, or like, I felt like I was, morally good as an 18-year-old or 17-year-old, and that was something, I trusted myself in that. I was like, no, I'm definitely like, I feel like I'm a good person. So, I have good intentions, but yeah, I loved journalism school. But I just like did too much. It was just, I got really burnt out by it. And at the same, like when I entered university, I was also still like an athlete. So I was on the soccer team and on the basketball team my first year. So it was just like doing everything, which was kind of like the theme of my life in a way. And then I started playing music after that year, and I quit sports essentially. But then I was kind of like doing music and school at the same time. And there were always these, every year you in journalism school, I'm sure it happens in other faculties where you just have like, journalists who will come in and talk to you about, their life or whatever. And sometimes like quite well-known journalists. And they were always great, generally, but there were always like a similar thread where it was like, they're really depressed. They're alcoholics probably. And if they wanted a family, they didn't have one, or if they did have a family, it was really tough. And like, they talked about that very openly, or it was just like so part of their story that, it was kind of like, sort of hard to ignore or hard to not even touch upon when they were doing a talk. And so I was just kind of like, I don't know if I can like do this, like, I don't know if that's how I want to, that doesn't seem like a very happy life. And then there was like, I remember there was another moment, I think, and that made it like, kind of like was like the nail in the coffin a little bit, where in my last year of university, one of the classes, we essentially would like run a media, like we'd run a website. That was kind of just the class, and it'd be a 3-hour class every week, and you'd basically like pitch stories, and then you have to go out and do the story, whether it be radio for I guess TV or YouTube or a written piece, and and then you do we would just be running a online magazine or online website or whatever. And there was like a big fire at a restaurant at like 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and nobody covered it. And so we came back to class that next Wednesday, and our professor just like railed on us for no one covering it. And it was, I just remember thinking like, she's right. We should have covered it. But I don't think I want to do this anymore. Like this isn't, I don't want to have to get up at 2 a.m, to go cover the story. I don't like that stress. And even when I'm, when I was with my journalist friends, or even when I talk to them now, or I'm with them now, like everybody's just on their phones. There's just like this like tension. Everybody's just like on edge because you're kind of just on call all the time. And that seems exhausting.
So there was this, so it was, as you learn more about the job, you're like, this doesn't seem like it's for me. Did that dilute that kind of elite sentiment that you came in with, or did you have to do other work to kind of dull that feeling?
Yeah, like that definitely came later on when I started working with journalists. So, I work in communications now, and I'm also a musician, so I kind of deal with journalists from two angles now, where in communications, I'm, often I work in media relations at the Department of Environment here, and climate change here. So I basically I'm the first point of contact for all the journalists. So they'll email me or email the department, and then that's me, or they'll call and leave a voicemail, and that's me. And then on the music side, I'm obviously doing interviews every once in a while and things like that. So I get to see the really good journalists, and I get to see the not so good journalists. And it just definitely takes it down a peg when you get to interact with people who are aren't maybe doing their due diligence on things. Or I don't want to go into it too much, but yeah, you get to basically see the good and the bad, and the bad definitely can bring people down a peg and be like, oh, okay, you're just a person. You're just a person, and you're you're as nervous to talk to me right now as I am maybe to answer your phone call or something.
I see. So so seeing that oh, this is this thing that I thought was a noble profession is also populated by incompetence, and there are inept people and hucksters and all those other kind.
Exactly.
So it's not. Yeah.
And also it's a common thing, when before you do the thing, you don't think that you can do it, and you're always looking at people who are doing it, and you're impressed or whatever, or you're sort of starry-eyed. But then when you're doing it, you're like, oh wait, I can do it, and that's kind of what happened. I was like, oh, I can, and I did journalism work, and I was like, oh, I can do this. It's not, I wasn't a foreign war correspondent or anything like that. Still is very impressive to me or whatever. But you're run-of-the-mill journalist. I'm like, oh yeah, that's something that a lot of people who are, if you're hardworking enough and you're sort of diligent enough, you can do a good job at it, I think.
Yeah. I could write a lead. I think I could.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd probably take me a little bit more time now, but yeah.
So your parents, what brought them to Niger in the first place? I thought you said I thought you said they worked for something called France Geo, but I didn't know what.
Oh, sorry. They just work for different NGOs, so non-governmental organizations.
Oh, NGOs.
Yeah. No worries.
Sorry, I didn't hear that right.
No worries.
I was like, oh, is this some kind of oil company?
Yeah, no.
France?
I try to be. I try to be good about not like saying a random thing and then assuming somebody knows it. I'm like, oh, they work for Frangio. You know what that is. No, so they work. They were just working for different NGOs. In the past maybe. What is it now? 30 years? Yeah, I'm 30, so 35 years, 40 years almost. What brought them to Niger was just me, actually. They were living in Guinea-Bissau, which is also in West Africa, and they had a friend who, like, my mom couldn't have children, so they knew they wanted to adopt, and they had a friend in Niamey, which is a capital of Niger. I really have asked them how they knew this person, but he was basically like, there are some children up for adoption, and so they came and they picked me. It was pretty wild. There's a picture somewhere still, I need to find it, of 4 babies on like a bed or on a mat or something, and I'm one of those children, and they picked me, and so it's like it's like kind of very intense when you think about the odds there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 or 4, I think. Yeah. It was either a 33% chance or a 25% chance. I can't remember how many kids were on there. But
how did you work through that to the kind of just like basic probability of your life?
I still am. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre to think about it in those terms. And I think about, I think about the people I meet in those terms, or the people I get to re-meet in the world in those terms as well, because often feels like a big sense of gravity to like the people I meet or whatever, because it always feels very faded based on like the start of the story or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't obsess over it or anything, but I think at some point I'll go back to Niger and maybe I'll have like the big crisis or whatever. But at this moment, I'm not. Like I thought that. I there was a few years ago, like I did think about it a lot, and then kind of like calm down, and I'm sure it'll come again. Yeah.
Yeah, you got 10, 15 years. You can have your midlife crisis. And
yeah, exactly. I'll put it on the shelf for now.
So, like, do you feel like you have roots besides just being born there? Do you feel like you have roots in Niger?
No, not at all. Not at all. I've never been back. I don't know anybody there. There's no information about who my birth parents are or would be. So the only maybe I do feel a little bit like I haven't met many people from Niger throughout my life, and I'm supposedly from a tribe called the Tuareg, or people called the Tuareg, and I've only met maybe like 4 Tuareg in my life, and it was all within the same year. I met a Tuareg from Mali, and that was like, but it was like very like out of the blue, so I couldn't, I just couldn't like process. I was like, oh, okay, like I'm having dinner, okay. And then the other one was I met Md Mokhtar. I don't know if you know him. He's like a guitar, and so he's from Niger and Tuareg, and that was very intense. Like even watching the show was very intense, and then meeting him was very intense. So I felt when I was at the show and like talking to him, like I definitely felt something, like some kind of connection or some kind of like intrinsic like musical lineage there, but I don't know. Yeah, there's still much to explore, but I don't know. I have a theory. Like I know that I have a weird internal rhythm, like musically. Like for me, rhythm is very circular, whereas I feel like, and especially here in North America, it's very linear a lot of the time. yeah, so I felt when I was watching that show, I definitely like felt like very like at home musically, which I never really do rhythmically a lot of the time. So that was cool. So there's something to explore there, but I'm not sure how to get there yet. Yeah.
Huh. So did you feel like when you were watching the show, like did you feel a kind of settled feeling?
After a while, yeah. At first it was very like intense, just like intense and like overwhelming, and then after a while it's like, oh, okay, like I could understand why I was feeling that way, and then that was fine. Yeah.
No, I asked just because I'm curious about these moments where, you know, things start to come into focus for people, where like you're in a situation, you're like, oh, like, I mean, I say this almost every episode, but like I finally felt settled as a person when I moved to New York to do comedy, because that's what I had wanted to do, and I had like been resisting it for so long, and then when I finally like gave into who I was, finally. I mean, it was a struggle the whole time, right? But like when I finally, it's a struggle to like let go in some way, right? And I'm kind of curious about those moments in other people when you find some kind of like, I don't know about peaceful feeling, but settled feeling, some kind of like feeling of like coming into your own as a person. Because I think that stuff filters into your art then. That's why I'm curious.
For sure. I don't know if that moment felt like that at all. Like it definitely felt like that feels like a long time ago for me, you know, like that doesn't feel like me now, but it felt like maybe just like an appendage or something, you know, that made sense, like a puzzle piece that like locked in a little bit more. But, you know, like really like if there was a moment like that for me, and maybe it's still kind of like happening, was when I moved to Montreal for me. It just felt right, and I feel the most comfortable here than I've felt anywhere else in the world. Which
really, what is it about Montreal? I've been there once when Naomi was a new face in Just for Laughs.
Okay, yeah.
And so I visit this. I mean, it's beautiful. I really like Montreal a lot. But like, what was it for you that like kind of like where you felt right, capital R, right?
I think it touches on so many things about my personality that and my person that I guess I never found in other cities. So I mean, firstly, it's a bilingual city in the two languages that like French and English, two languages that I have spoken since I was a child. I speak a couple others, but like those were the two that I learned when I was a kid. And so that like feels very comfortable. It's an artistic city, and I think I've like accepted myself as an artist. But it's also a city where, in many neighborhoods anyways, because it is like, you know, it is a city, so it has, you know, the neighborhoods are very different. But generally, my sense of everywhere that I've been in the city for the last 4 years is that it's a place where you can kind of be whoever you want to be, and people are generally fine with it. Like, you know, like maybe politically there are issues or whatever, and, you know, systematically there are issues, of course, but in terms of like your day-to-day life, like in French it's like ton quotidien, like I don't know what the translation would be, but it's just people, there is a sort of just acceptance of like, this is a weird person, but like I'm not going to I don't want to say that too much because I'm sure there are people who have, you know, other experiences, but my experience and observation experience with my friends' experiences have been such that like generally you can kind of be who you want to be, and that's like not just fine but kind of like accepted. And I haven't felt that in other cities generally, but that I've been to. And then after that there's just like a community of folks that, you know, I love very much, and I feel very fortunate to have fallen into. And also there's a good amount of people that I knew when I was living on the east coast of Canada that have also like kind of moved here and that I've stayed in touch with, and so that I have that sort of piece of the puzzle as well. Yeah.
Do you think so? I'm trying to figure something out about you, like, and it could be, I'll give you these possibilities. It could be something else. It could be your journalism background. Could be being multilingual, not just bilingual. You said you are proficient in other languages could be moving around a lot. But like I noticed that like you are very much, I have something similar in me, but you are very much, you see things from other people's point of view too, because you were like, well, this is my experience.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a while to be like, it's okay for me to have my experience. It's okay for me to like, I can be empathetic and see things from other people's point of view. But I noticed that you are very much like, well, this is my kind of, I know that other people have had different experiences. Do you know where that comes from in you? Have you thought about it?
Well observed. I think like I don't think this is an uncommon story, but I think that like I didn't have like the greatest time when I was a kid in school. And I was just often like alone or just like, ostracized or bullied, and just like had pretty like not great time up until I went to university really. And so I think anytime I feel like somebody is left out or isn't able to like speak their truth or have their voice heard in some way, like I feel very connected to that in a certain way, and I feel super empathetic to that in a way, like I do feel it like in my body. And so and there is some, I just kind of get annoyed when that happens, because I'm just like, why isn't this person able to have their experience? And so even a lot, honestly, even if I disagree with what they're wanting to say, I can see the sort of how annoyed they might be or the pain that they might have. So, it's just always something that I've had, and I feel lucky to have now sort of been able to find myself in some way and have some sense of confidence. And so, to me, it's just like, well, if this person isn't being heard, then that's kind of my responsibility to help them in some way.
Yeah.
Or have their just not even help them, because like just give them space to have their opinion heard, because why not?
Yeah. What's going on in these international schools? Why were you bullied?
I mean, it's just the same as like any other school, and it's weird because I think like I don't know what high schools are like now, but I talk to my friends who are even like maybe 3-4 years younger, and their experience of school is so different to mine. Like I feel like maybe my experience might be closer to yours in terms of like people were still like kind of separated into like jocks and nerds and whatever, like that was like still very much. Whereas I don't know, my understanding of what it looks like now is it seems a bit more different. People are there's sort of maybe more of a mixing going on. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that seems to be my impression. But yeah, I just like, I was always entering schools where, even though they were international schools and people were kind of coming in and out every year, there were still like, your people who went to these international schools who like had been there their whole lives or had been there for 5 years, or whatever. So I was always having to enter into like new scenarios, which I liked, but I wasn't like very confident. I was like just weird. Like I think I'm kind of a weird person. And so I just, I was just like very easy target to get bullied, and I was like a pretty sensitive person. Still am probably. I mean, it's just kind of, I can't like explain why one kid gets picked over another necessarily. But it is kind of weird. Like I was like an athlete and did all the things that, the popular kids would do, like generally, but I never went to like parties or anything. I was like very much like a solo person for that time. And then, once I got invited to like this like leadership summit camp or whatever at Harvard, which sounds so weird to say now, but it was like a bunch, like 200 kids or 300 kids from literally all around the world. And one of my teachers had nominated me, a teacher I thought hated me, nominated me to go. And I went there, and that kind of like flipped the script, because I was kind of like, I remember just being like, like I'm not like a bad person. Like I'm fine. Like I'm good. Like I get along with adults. I could always get along with adults. I just could never get along with kids.
Interesting.
And then I was just kind of like, oh, I'm like a fine person. And I don't know, something just switched where I was just like, didn't look at myself as like somebody who wasn't like worthy of like friendship or anything. I was just kind of like, no, like I'm fine. Like the problem is with them. It's not with me. And so,
wait, had you internalized that? Like feel like up until the leadership summit? Is that what you said?
yeah.
Had you internalized this kind of like ostracized feeling and like made it like a part, like not made it purposely a part of you, but like, oh, well, it must be something about me.
Yeah, of course. Like, I think that's normal if like you're in that situation. Like, you think that maybe something's wrong with you. And of course, like in a way, that is the case because you're not like fitting into like whatever norms are around you. But like, inevitably there is no problem with you. It's just like, that's just the way you are and you haven't found your people. But the problem is with them because they're uncomfortable with you but and I wasn't comfortable with myself. I didn't know much about myself. And so, yeah, it's weird. I don't know why like that like flipped all of a sudden, but yeah, it was like very much like day and night in a way.
Oh, do you think that was there at the, like not knowing about your origins in quotes in some way was like I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what the metaphor I want is, but like an empty feeling, an emptiness in this core of you.
I don't know. Like, I have a sister and she's also adopted. She's from Vietnam, and she definitely had a very different experience than me. And we have, in terms of like in high school or school or whatever. And so I don't know if it was necessarily that. I just think that when you're a weird kid, you're just a good target,
I get it.
I don't know if you can relate, but
100%. I was a weird kid. I am a weird adult.
Yeah.
I understand.
I had an inkling, but I didn't want to put that on you.
You're like, I feel a weird kind of like consonance with this guy. I know. I understand.
I feel like you can tell usually. You can be like, I feel like empathetic people usually come from some kind of like experience like that. Like, I don't think you necessarily have that. I mean, maybe you do but like usually it does come from like having a sort of experience that mirrors, the one that you're witnessing or whatever.
Yeah. I think being othered as a kid it doesn't always lead to this, but I think for whatever reason, like if you're weird, and you are, like, I was Jewish in a very Christian area, right? So I think those started to like reinforce each other in some way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Whereas if I had been Christian, I wonder if my weirdness would have been diluted at some point.
Maybe. I mean, it probably would have maybe been diluted for some point and then like would have reemerged at some point. I think it's pretty hard to like hide who you are up until a certain point. I mean, some people are able to do it, but usually, it's pretty hard to like hide that from yourself.
Yeah. Well, when you were a kid, what made you weird?
I don't know. That's the weird thing. 'Cause like, it's not like I like dressed in a weird way or provocative. I wasn't like a loud kid or anything like that. Like, I think like maybe I was like I was very honest about how I felt about things maybe, and that like put people off. And then I like, because I noticed that put people off, then maybe I just like became more sequestered. But I was just kind of like not social, which is weird now because I'm a pretty social person. I'm still very much an introvert, but like I enjoy being with people a lot, and I get energy from that. But at the time I just didn't want to. I still like I don't. It's hard for me to like go on vacation or like go to a party sometimes, or like I don't always. I have like a big anxiety around that a lot of the time. And when I was a kid, I was just like, I just would like think through like the logistics of like going to the movies, but to be fair, like I was, other than, we lived in Holland, and that was kind of maybe like a place that like more replicated like the way that kids in the States or in Canada would maybe grow up. But otherwise, like we were, when you're living in the Philippines or whatever, like going to the movies is like, that's kind of like you have to like get somebody to drive you, and like it has to be in some kind of way safe. Like there were like real world like implications to like going to have fun. Or like when I was in Kenya, I was like 15, so like going to like a club or something like that, like to me, like there I could just think about like the bad things that could happen a lot of the time. And so I think but then also just like having to like talk to people or like be with people, like I didn't understand what was fun about that. And I still I still don't know what's fun about doing a certain amount of those things, and so I just don't do them. But at the time when you're a kid, you just think that you need to do them, right?
No, totally. That was the same thing for me, because there was a certain point, I think maybe in after college at some point, where I was like, oh, you know what, if I don't think X or Y thing is fun, I don't have to go do that. I can find a fun thing to do with like a friend of mine just invited me to some party, and I was like, hey, do you want to just go play mini golf instead?
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
Especially like quote unquote post pandemic, really mid pandemic with a little twist of Delta. I'm like, I don't want to be at a party with a bunch of strangers. But I would like go play mini golf with one other person.
Oh yeah. I'm curious to know, like, do you find that you're even, I don't know, if before you weren't into going to parties, are you even less so now because of the past 2 years?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't really, it's a lot of, I mean, this is the thing that I'm getting from you, which is I'm an introvert. I think you are also an introvert. Yeah. And so it's a lot of energy to be around other people. Yeah,
like I think I'm definitely, if there's a spectrum, I'm like a bit more to the middle than I used to be, or I mean, maybe more introverts, because I do really enjoy being around people and like sometimes even being the life of the party, dare I say, or of the conversation, not of the party. Like I do. I would kind of reach a point of like critical mass where I'm like, I need to be alone for a week or whatever. And I do feel overwhelmed by having to like, see a friend or talk to somebody on the phone, like after a while. And it's like, I need to be alone for like a week, please.
Yeah. 100%. Did your parents treat you as a child when you were a child, or did they treat you more like an adult?
I would say probably like a child. I think, yeah. I'm trying to think of what treating a child like an adult would look like, essentially.
I think more like an adult is less sheltering you from the awfulness of the world, and being a little more honest about what existence is like and that kind of stuff versus
I think maybe a bit more as a child, but like I think just because of where we were living, it was like hard to not to like unsee or not see things, sort of see the bad in the world or the struggles in the world. But one thing I definitely never saw was like the struggle of being an adult, which I think maybe if you are treating your child like an adult, maybe you're a bit more open to that. Like I never, just like now being, something of an adult, like it's like, I don't know. I'm sure everybody or a lot of people go through that understanding of like, man, it's like, it's hard in some ways, or it's like, I understand that anxiety or that struggle or a lot more. But in terms, like they never like, I remember seeing like, or just like, I've definitely like watched a lot of like really like horrible, sad news stories, which maybe other parents would like have like sheltered their kids away from a little bit. Like those realities of the world were like always made very clear to us. Like it was never, I never took that as like, that seemed normal to me.
Because I was just trying to probe like, your weirdness as a child. No, because I'm like curious about this, like, because you're growing up in these international schools. I would assume that other people are coming from similar backgrounds as you, and I'm like, why are they treating you? Why are they othering you?
Yeah,
when
right.
Everyone should be othered in these kinds of contexts, right? At least in my mind. I've never been to an international school.
I mean, I think it's at the end of the day, it's still like a school and it's still kids. So, yeah, I mean,
like it could be class sentiments again, like this kind of like
this
kind of feeling of it's not even that.
Not even because it wasn't obvious to everybody who was who, like nobody like necessarily knew what my parents were doing. Like that definitely wasn't a thing. I mean, in some places, I'm sure it was like, related to race for sure. Cause when I was in the Philippines, I was like one of very few black kids, that's definitely a thing that existed too, in different schools. But yeah, I don't know. I wish that I could like see myself as a kid and like understand, because like now it just seems so I'm just kind of like, that doesn't make a ton of sense. But when I think back, I'm like, yeah, I get why they thought I was weird, because I was kind of weird and just like didn't shy or just like didn't talk to people that much. And I was very like afraid probably of things. And I think kids smell fear pretty well. And they're just like, here we go, new fresh meat, let's do this a little bit. But yeah, whatever. Like it's I'm just kind of like, well, it's I'm glad that I didn't turn out I'm glad that I turned out with the amount of confidence that I have. I think feels more leveled out.
Are your parents Canadian?
My dad is Canadian. My mom is complicated, but she's ethnically Indian, but grew up in Mozambique, but is her nationality is Belgian now. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm going to throw out a theory.
Sure.
And I'm like, you're growing up, okay, here's the theory. You're not 100% sure of your origins, right? Mm-hmm. Niger and maybe like I don't know my history that well, but I know there were like a series of like military, I don't know if you call them juntas, but like, and then there were like little interregnums in between. Like, do you remember when were you born? Was it during one of those military dictatorships, or was it like in those little?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah, I haven't looked into that history, but yeah, it's 91. So I couldn't tell you. Yeah. So
I won. Okay. So we know like there's some kind of question mark there.
Yeah.
You are in a extreme, like your family unit itself is pretty multicultural, and you're moving about in these different situations where there's no maybe like kind of like cultural I'm trying to think of like a metaphor of like a some kind of like dense object in space that like everything goes around.
Right, yeah.
And so I wonder if there's some kind of measure of like all of that together. Like maybe there's not a thing you can hold on to. Does that make sense at all? I know it's very it's very metaphorical.
No, I mean, that's not far away from how I understand myself or understand my like the things I'm holding on to. I think it's hard to say, because I think that I'm still, I feel like in the last maybe 5 years I've found myself in a new way. Like I think when I was 18 to like 25 there was like or 18 to like 22 there was a thing, and then 22 to like 26 there was a whole other finding myself, and now I feel like a lot more settled now, and I'm still I'm like, I think I figured out like my personality, which is great, but I'm kind of like now in the middle of figuring out what I want to do, and how I want to live my life. So, but I think the things that I hold on to, are like my roots are with my family, even though we're so different. I feel very like different than the three of them, in a lot of ways, but then, I'm sure they all feel the same way in some way, in some way as well. But like I think that like if there's like something that I may be orbiting, it's maybe that is just the three of them in a way.
Oh, interesting.
And like, yeah, or like, and now I have a niece and I have a brother-in-law, and like weirdly, like my brother-in-law is like, he's like Bulgarian, but grew up in Canada his whole life, but also has like a very, but went to like a school where there's a lot of international kids. And now my niece is half Vietnamese ethnically and half Bulgarian. Like there is that, I don't know, that is kind of an orbit. And then I was thinking about different friend groups of mine that I have, and generally the people that I feel closest to, with a few exceptions, are like people who aren't born in Canada, who have kind of like come from other places. And so that like there is like sort of like, if there is something that I'm orbiting around, it is like kind of that energy of people who are maybe displaced or in a different place than where they maybe are originally from, and that there is a connection there. Because I do feel, I've talked about this recently with a bunch of friends, where like there is something about that like makes us feel like immediately like connected to each other. I don't know what it is. And even if it's just somebody that I meet at the grocery store, or like somebody who's like helping me at some point in my life for like 2 seconds, like I feel like a much bigger connection with them than a lot of the times with people who maybe are more grounded in their roots.
Yeah, I totally feel that like a diasporic energy, right? Like a kind of
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I totally identify with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you? So we're towards the end of the show, but like I'm kind of curious.
Sure.
Was part of finding yourself, like you said, you didn't start playing music until late, like in your 20s, right?
Almost
or recording
like,
music.
Yeah, like I say this, and then I guess I'm wrong to say this, but like I started playing guitar when I was 19, and in my mind that's when I started playing music, but that isn't true now that I think about it, because I had piano lessons when I was younger. I wasn't great at them. My sister was much better, of course. And
why, of course?
Like I just feel like it's like if there's two siblings, there's like one that's really good, and then there's one that's like, there's like the one who's like able to follow the rules of the lessons, and then there's the other one who's just like, I want to do my own thing. And so I think that was the difference. And I sang in choirs, and I wrote songs when I was a kid, and I knew first it was weird because I was like this athlete who was like doing that 7 days a week, a lot of two a days, like that was my life. But then I was like wanting to play music and just like didn't realize it. But in my mind, when my sister lent me her guitar when I was 19, and then I started writing songs, and like in my mind that's kind of like when I like really started being aware that like I was like consciously doing it. It wasn't just something like before. I felt like I was just like I still feel like I have to do it, but like I was just doing it without even thinking that I was making music. I was just like, oh, I'm just like doing this thing, or I'm just like writing these lyrics. Whereas at that point I was like, no, I'm like actually like I know that I'm writing a song now.
Right. Right. You made an existential choice too.
yeah, it felt like a choice, and I was just like, okay, I'm actually doing this now. And like right away I just started writing songs and recording. Like I didn't learn other people's songs until a good while after that. Yeah.
So was that part
I don't know
of
if that answers your question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just ask this final one then. Was that part of this process of you finding yourself, or was it just a side effect of you finding yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it was fully part of finding myself. It was fully, because I do feel like being a musician, for better or for worse, is like a part of my identity, or making music is a part of my identity. It feels like the most natural thing that I do. Like, I've said this before to folks, but like, yeah, when I don't necessarily think about what I'm going to write, or I don't think about writing songs. It just within, it'll happen one day, and then for 2 weeks I'm just writing songs straight, and I can't stop, and that's it. And then I won't do it for a long time. Like it feels like very much just coming through me. So, and because of music, I've also found a community of friends. Like everyone that I'm friends with generally is either a musician or comes through that community in some way, through an artistic community. So yeah, it very much is like helped me find myself, and we'll see how long that lasts. Maybe but no, I'm kidding. But like, by how long it lasts, I mean by me making music, not by me being in those communities. Maybe I'll want to do something else in 10 years, but for now it feels like very, very much like the thing that I want to do.
Well, I mean, is there anything else that like connects to your childhood in the same way that like making music does?
No, that's for sure. But like, I feel like I experience music in different ways. So I used to have it a lot more, but I have synesthesia, so I see or feel music and color. Anyways, that's my synesthesia. But and then I write a lot to film or to moving pictures. I think a lot about like wanting to do some acting or some directing or like doing comedy. Like there's a lot of like creative energy that is outside of music that I know that I want to do at some point. But I mean, I don't think it necessarily ties back to my childhood, but I do often wonder if like one of my parents was like some kind of musician or my biological parents was like a musician or actor or like did something artistic, because it does feel like very intrinsic in my being. Like it doesn't, I don't feel like I ever had to learn how to be like appreciate music or be a musician in some way. Like it felt like it's just something that once I decided I was just doing it.
When you were a kid, did you understand your synesthesia?
No, it wasn't until I think I might have been when I was just talking to like a family friend who's like or like a child of a family friend, I guess. And we were just talking, and I think we both realized we had it, and then she knew what it was, maybe. Or maybe I just looked it up one day or something. But yeah, it was like when I was a kid, I would really like see colors, and now it's more like I feel it. So like when I write, I know what colors I want to write with.
Interesting.
Which is sounds very a pie in the sky thing to say.
Because I wonder if that was alienating, right? I wonder if there was I wonder if there was some kind of like, oh, maybe like, wait, are other people experiencing the world like I'm experiencing it?
Oh, no, that's interesting. I never thought of that. I never thought about whether other people were seeing or experiencing it that way, but I think it did like probably keep me in my head more, It's probably one of the things that, because I do overthink all the time, even now, but at the time I was just always in my head. So it was probably just another way to just keep me from being a social being.
Interesting. Not to wrap all the way back around to Descartes again, but like there's that thing in him where he's like, we're again back to Cartesian doubt. Am I seeing the world like other people are? And then like not. The answer is maybe not. You don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, a very definitive and comforting answer. Maybe.
I mean, this has just been a delight. Thank you for talking.
Likewise. This has been great. Yeah. And if I'm ever in LA, I'll and playing a show, I'll let you know about it. If you're
please do.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye, bye, beginnings good.